Let's go live. We're going live now. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Weather Center Nazario is back in the Weather Center. We wanted to go ahead and provide a brief update today, not only because of our return to some actual live data, both analysis and model, but also on the same token, we just wanted to sit down and do a brief what's called after-action report for our first ever actual covered storm chase last night during this, we'll say, enhanced weather threat, since we really didn't realize any major severe weather criteria. We'll give it a couple moments for some folks to join in, and then we'll begin to break down a couple things. And I want to start off by saying, for those of you tuning in after the live stream has concluded, thank you very much for joining me last night, joining me this afternoon. I hope your Sunday has been very wonderful up until this point, and I hope it continues to be on a high note, especially now that us here in Florida are dealing with some pretty spectacular weather conditions. We've had our windows open pretty much all morning, and now we're getting ready to head out for the day, a lot of us, to go and take part in a few festivities since the weather has cleared up and there's still a little bit of time left in the weekend. It was definitely a pleasure getting to stream with you guys last night. Definitely have some really valuable lessons learned for the future to provide even better content for you guys when we're out there in the field, especially when there is more when there's more intense weather activity to document and to cover. But I think last night, for a preliminary run on the channel for the first time, we did fairly okay. I think we did all right for ourselves. We'll give it a little bit while for folks to join in. Milagros, welcome in. Super Charas, hello there. Wilhelm Red, storm surge was interesting. Yes, it was. I did notice that there were areas that definitely saw a lot more surge up close to where this storm came ashore, and that's why I have us starting off on the infrared satellite shot. You can very clearly track where that storm went ahead and kept going right in through there. So we saw a landfall very close to the Cedar Key area. Very similar to what we saw Idalia do back in August. And I know this wasn't a tropical system. This is a very bona fide subtropical low. You can see it really taking on the comma cloud looking characteristic. Very well-defined sectors with it now. We have our warm sector here and then our cold sector, that frontal appendage extending down like so, helping to drive a lot of the wind activity we're seeing here in Central and South Florida right now. Pretty good. We've got very gusty winds. In fact, honestly, the gusts out here in my backyard have been very similar to what I was seeing last night when I was out in Tampa Bay. I'm in PBC right now since yesterday. Interested to see how Vero did when we get home. Hoping my inflatable Grinch stayed. He was hanging from the second story. Ooh, hopefully so. Hopefully so. I know there were a lot of reports of Christmas decorations and things along those lines getting blown over and damaged, and some torn to shreds, unfortunately, because we did have bouts of 40 to 50, 60 knot winds in certain isolated areas, particularly on the south and west coastlines and even on the southeast coastlines of Florida. It might be a little difficult for you guys to see, but the reason we have such substantial wind flow right now is because if you look very closely, there are really good, strong wraparound winds coming along the south side and the west side of this system, just blasting the Florida peninsula. In fact, let me go ahead and let's switch the satellite image real quick so you guys can take a closer look and see what I see. I'll switch over to College of DuPage, and we'll go visible satellite. We'll get a little closer. We'll go sub-regional down to the state of Florida, and then we'll go visible red. And you guys will be able to see once I turn the loop on, and I'll speed it up just a little bit so you guys can see more of a real-time display. There we go. So go back just a little bit. We'll go 48 hours so we can actually track it through. You see like this little low-level jet of winds right here? That's what's given us such really strong wind activity. We have what look to be multiple little embedded troughs with this storm as well, which is very cool to see on the satellite image. You can see 1 weak trough axis rolling through right there, another weak trough axis firing up some convection there, another weak trough axis right in through there. So there's multiple little what we call perturbations embedded within this center of circulation, which is now up here just over top the Georgia-South Carolina border, kind of spinning off the coastline, it looks like, right in somewhere through here, a very elongated donut-shaped center of circulation with this. Oh yeah, absolutely, because of this system, that's why. Do you know why the winds are increased tonight for Charleston area? That's because of this situation right here. We're still seeing a deepening low pressure. We'll go ahead and look at some of the model data here in a moment. But this low is not finished yet. In fact, we saw mainly just the preliminary stages of the cyclogenesis with it off of our west coast, and as it populated through the northern periphery of the Sunshine State, moving through Georgia, and now into the Carolinas for that matter. I also wanted to dive into the Caribbean real quick, because one of my biggest gripes with this storm were the number of folks kind of dismissing what was happening in Florida and the rest of the Southeast and talking about the Caribbean. And just as I had mentioned, if you guys recall a few video segments back, because of how warm the air is out here and how warm the waters are, notice how we're seeing a lot of good air mass modification. Even though we have all this cold air pumping in behind it, you can very flagrantly see it on this infrared satellite shot, a clear delineation in our air masses. You have all this cool, dry air surging in out of the northwest, and then we still have our prevailing easterly flow. And that's the main reason we're starting to see very, very isolated bouts of convective activity. It's very cool. I'll try to slow the loop down just a little bit so you guys can see. But right in through here, we have a really good neutral point in our winds. A call is what it's called. And that's why, if you notice, we have opposing wind flow here and opposing wind flow here, and you can see how the clouds are more or less tumbling. They're literally tumbling in that neutral point in the wind flow, and that's why we're having very sporadic isolated storm activity, because we have two conflicting air masses, warm maritime tropical moist air coming out of the Caribbean, and then we have our modified polar air that's moving through the Gulf, coming across the state of Florida, interacting with it, and they're in a bare-knuckle brawl right now. And those winds only have, that flow only has one thing better to do in the low levels, and that's go up. And that's why we're starting to see very isolated pockets of maybe some shower and thunderstorm activity, really, really good wind shear out there, so nothing that's really going to self-sustain itself. So yeah, I just wanted to get that out there. You know, everyone was talking about how we were going to see really bad rains for Belize, Nicaragua, Honduras, down towards Costa Rica even. But you can see that Cuba is really barely seeing any kind of activity with this. Cayman Islands, maybe some sporadic shower activity. Jamaica also seeing some isolated bouts, more than likely being enhanced by the higher terrain features over that island. It's the Bahamas now who are really seeing some good weather activity with that. And even at this point in time, notice that the orientation of the islands is like so, and our strongest convective indices are going to be pushing out and just out ahead of their area too, so they're almost out of the realm of any kind of dangerous activity with this. And then last but not least, I just thought this was pretty neat. We'll move on in a second, but I just want to show you guys something very cool. It's once again an area or a little tidbit you can use to identify what kind of air mass you're in. And take a look at this right here. What this is a little embedded shortwave trough, if you want to call it that, a perturbation, very minute. We'll call it a minor shortwave. It's not necessarily a major shortwave, but it's very cool how you can see some cold core activity. And the reason I say cold core is if you look, I'll use a different color ink here. This is our area of temperature discontinuity. This is our, we'll say, a CP air mass, continental polar, and then down here we have our maritime tropical air out entrenched over the Caribbean because of not only the hot sea surface temps, but just because we're closer to the equator. And in or poleward of where our jet stream is running. The jet is right in through here, feeding right into our low. This is all jet stream, and it is now poleward or north of the jet, so it's entirely within the cold sector of our jet stream, and it's very cool how you can see not really anything associated with it, but really cool little moisture pocket, cold core moisture pocket in the upper levels of the environment. So I just wanted to throw that little fun fact out there for you. Here's our windy overlay, and just as I had mentioned in the Caribbean, I'll scroll down a little bit. You can very easily identify where our call is. That's the neutral point in the wind. It's the transitional point, if you will, between air masses. So here's our MT once again, and then our CP modifying into MP air in association with our subtropical jet and the polar front jet that kind of troughed down like so. And one little interesting fun fact was when I was in synoptic meteorology in the Air Force, one of my mentor, Mr. Shane Castle, he's joined us for a number of live streams. He had mentioned a really, really easy way for you to do a sanity check without looking at any model data, without looking at any analysis data, without having to pull up anything really weather-related. If you saw this happening right in through there, you see the funneling in the winds through the Tehuantepec Canyon here, and then down here through Nicaragua, we have another little area of funneling going on, how there's an acceleration in the winds. You remember that fire hose effect I briefed you guys about? That goes to show that's how far south our cool modified air has made it. So this entire region through here is a totally different air mass. So that's why we have such significant activity still associated with our system, because we have this really good butting up against this boxing match between two conflicted air masses here. So you can see that acceleration down here, and you don't really have to look at anything else. You just know for certain that that's where our front has moved because of the funneling and the lower terrain features. This is still very impressive. You can still see that very elongated center of circulation. In fact, it looks like we have a low here beginning to detach and form another one in direct South Carolina, approaching the Florence area. And then all this really, really intense onshore flow, which is what we were briefing yesterday during some of our live streams and earlier this week in my full-fledged segments. This is going to continue, and I do think that they are under the gun for some severe weather activity right in through here, where a lot of that onshore flow is going. Any further than that, where you can see the winds die down, right about here is going to be very nil to none. And I think that's why we saw very little severe activity inland over parts of Florida. We still had very good modified polar air, very cold air entrenched down in the low levels, and that's one key takeaway from here on out that I want to start doing on this channel more, and especially for our storm chases. We need to utilize analysis data, especially our Skew-T upper air soundings. I think if we honestly looked at Skew-Ts more than just a lot of our high-res data for the state, more broad-scale data for the state in the southeast, I think we would have been able to determine if we were really going to see any severe potential, especially work its way inland, whether it be west coast or east coast Florida. Oh yeah, definitely Spider Gwench. There's definitely some damage out there, guys. Don't get me wrong. We saw some pretty good impacts. We just saw moderate level impacts. The severe weather came in the form of flooding and coastal flooding, for sure. That was our severe weather impact. Otherwise, we saw moderate level winds, some areas with the occasional severe weather criteria, 50 knots or greater, which is what caused some down trees. The rain collection didn't help us or do us any favors either. That's why I had mentioned previously on a few different videos that, rain is good for the drought, but too much all at once is going to cause problems, and that's exactly what we saw yesterday. Some very good key takeaways I noticed as well is we saw some very, very poor handling, I think, with a lot of our model data. I think some of the high-res data, HRRR, 3-kilometer NAM, the FV3, they did very well with that one system. Sorry, guys, if I keep doing this, I for some reason have an itch. They did very well with that one system that skirted the south and southeast coastline of Florida back in November. Excellent job. This time around, I think they got a little overzealous. I think our severe weather parameters were much lower than what we were alluded to at first. I definitely think that there wasn't much of a threat for isolated tornadic activity, definitely off the coastline over the Gulf of Mexico for sure. There's probably a tremendous amount of tornado, or I should say water spouts, that we just couldn't see because they were hundreds of miles off the coastline, especially after sunset. I know after I'd called it a night, shortly after midnight, when I got home, I looked at base velocity, and there were a number of little supercellular storms trying to run for the Tampa Bay area. They just could not get close. They just could not make it. They couldn't make it in. So we did have the dynamics in play over the water, and I do think that's mainly because of the modification of our thunderstorms that we saw between the actual inland state and offshore. And if you guys remember I had mentioned that term diurnal trends, diurnal changes, the difference between daytime dynamics and nighttime dynamics. I think that's also what shut us down big time as well. We had a lot of rain falling throughout much of the day. We had a lot of dissipation of that surface and mid-level energy that would have helped provide us with severe weather. And on top of that, a lot of this event was going to happen well after midnight. And at that point, the landmass is going to cool a lot more substantially than the water. And I think that's why we still had a lot of indications on radar and satellite that there were really good pockets of convection flaring up off our coast. But then as soon as they tried to move inland, they just washed out and blurred out together and just became more stratiform rain, moderate to heavy rainfall throughout a large area. And it's mainly because we were kind of set up for failure. Had this taken place later in the day, later in the afternoon, and then expanded into the overnight hours, we probably would have seen a stray funnel or tornado or two, just because we would have had the sun and what daytime heating that could take place despite the overcast cloud cover helped kind of amplify the buoyancy we had in the environment. And that's why I'd mentioned that going forward, I think for situations like this, whether it be during the rest of winter time, dealing with El Nino systems, or even during the springtime when it looks like we have a viable setup for some tornadic activity in the Florida Peninsula, I want to lean back from model data and start looking more at Skew-T soundings and localized effects, because I think they would have been very telling. I think had I just looked at a Skew-T or two last night for Tampa, West Florida, I would have known right away, yeah, we're not going to see anything. And that leads me right into another key takeaway before we continue on with this update right here. This is what I definitely want to invest in with you guys. I need to call Spectrum, that's my internet and home cable provider, and I want to see how they can set us up with a mobile hotspot that I can mount maybe underneath the dash or inside the glove compartment of my car for when we go storm chasing. This way there is no possibility of losing service. I'll have good connectivity throughout the duration of the chase. This way I can actually stream consistently without, having to break up, without YouTube kicking us out, without other little situations or instances of losing that connection with you guys and having to go dark like I did at the end of my live stream last night before I headed home. That's another reason why I headed home, is just my phone was not having it. It seemed like there were very intermittent pockets of cell service where I was in Tampa, likely because of the rain coupled with all the high-rise buildings I was around. And it just, it was becoming a bit more of a mess. And this is something I definitely want to invest in for our next big storm chase, because this is going to help tremendously. And then on top of that, I'm going to be bringing my laptop next time too with this wireless puck, so this way I can have you guys mounted in a stream and I can very quickly turn over and look at actual data while we're in the middle of a storm chase. It's going to help easily 5 to 10 times better than what we did last night. No tornadoes. Nope. There wasn't even a watch issued, if I'm not mistaken. They never went forward with a tornado watch. Yeah, see, 5 inches in Ocala, and that's definitely over what a lot of our forecast models were predicting. So it goes to show our models ain't perfect. For all you folks maybe watching this afterward, stop swearing by the Euro, because the Euro definitely very severely under-forecasted all the rainfall and the flooding and the accumulation we saw. Euro has been doing terrible, in fact, with those predictions. I know the last time we had that squall feature roll through about a week or so prior to this storm popping up on our radars, very severely under-forecasted once again, was thinking maybe we're going to get like a quarter of an inch throughout much of Central and South Florida, and we ended up seeing upwards of an inch or two for most of the state. Minus, of course, when the squall line started to break up, obviously, but I need you guys to stop swearing by the Euro. The Euro is not the end-all, be-all. It is not the meteorological god, clearly, because now we're running into situations here in non-convective wintertime season, and it's doing terribly. The only thing that it did really well on, I think personally, and it even kind of messed that up, was the track of the low. Because clearly we noticed that the GFS actually did a much better job of where it tracked from the jump start this time around as opposed to the Euro. So I got to give props to the GFS. I think the GFS and once again the Canadian model were on top of the situation that we just went through over the last 12 to 24 hours. Euro started off depicting that it was going to be a South Florida, Florida Keys impact. Then it bumped it up towards Fort Myers. Then it bumped it up towards Tampa. And then a couple of preliminary runs before the main event had it just to the north of Tampa. But as we saw on the satellite image right here, that storm definitely passed in a very similar fashion to what Idalia did. And I think that also is what changed the name of the game in terms of what kind of severe weather impacts we saw where we were trying to chase last night. Because we chased all through this general area, but because that storm center passed to the north, the probability of seeing any type of severe activity kind of went with it in this sort of fashion like so. And so we really, really missed the target in this case, unfortunately. But you know what? You live and you learn. This was our first actual storm chase, and I honestly am very grateful that I got a chance to chase and go through the struggles that I did, because it goes to show these are lessons learned that I'm going to keep in my back pocket for next time to even more so improve not only on the coverage I provide you guys, but also just keep me safe. Because dang, let me tell you, I didn't stream on YouTube, but I-75 still, I think I-75 was where we saw the most severe impacts with this bad weather, and it was in the form of car accidents. I saw a number of vehicles totaled. I saw vehicles overturned on the freeway. I saw vehicles facing the opposite direction on the northbound side of I-75, and that was, I think, the scariest part of this whole experience, was just dealing with the dare I say it, the ridiculous drivers out there who just didn't know how to handle the situation and the phenomena that we were in and started causing accidents. There were emergency sirens and emergency vehicles out there running all over the place just to help these people in car accidents. So that's another huge takeaway for this. You know, it's not always the weather phenomena. It's unfortunately the folks around you who don't know how to mitigate the weather phenomena. And we don't brief that enough across the meteorological community. I think we don't talk about that enough, at least based off of the people I've seen, myself included. I'm going to go ahead and throw that out there. I haven't brought this up enough, I think, on my channel. Definitely stay home. And it's not necessarily, we don't say stay home because the weather itself is going to be bad. It's because you could very easily, and I know I've mentioned this before, find yourself in a bad situation. And in this case, there were a lot of folks out there who didn't need to be out and about at 9, 10, 11 o'clock at night. God knows what they were doing. Perhaps they were still just trying to go out on the town or something like that. Or maybe they were coming home from work. Who knows? I'm not going to judge or say anything negative towards them. But unfortunately, there were a lot of folks who found themselves in a bad situation even before the storm had really arrived and we were just seeing the heavy rain. So it goes to show that severe weather doesn't only come in the form of the weather itself. You want to make sure you're not out and about putting others in danger, putting yourself in danger. Because there were a few times I was on Instagram Live and I definitely bobbed and weaved around getting into an accident myself. People being scared, people not knowing how to drive through the bad rain, the bad wind. There were folks braking right in front of me. I'm doing 70, 75 on I-75 and people want to slam on their brakes. And that's just dangerous. It's those kind of things that we as meteorologists and weather enthusiasts need to start communicating to folks, and we need to delineate between, we don't emphasize staying home and staying in place just because of bad weather. Sometimes it has nothing to do with that. We just don't want you guys out and about because I'm going to be blunt. I'm going to be very blunt. There's a lot of you out there who don't know how to handle even the worst of just a thunderstorm or rain, and that's what causes accidents and it gets people killed. And it goes to show that a lot of the state just saw a very heavy rainfall for the most part, and I'm sure that there were at least a dozen accidents in just the short area that I went through because of the bad weather. Wow, yeah, see? That goes to show 2 inches of water inside the office. There were easily way more than 2 inches of rain that probably fell in that area over a short period of time. And it once again, a concluding factor right there. Euro definitely under forecasted this scenario, at least for our flood risk. Definitely severely under forecasted it. That's going to help out tremendously. That set up what the Park and Spectrum is step their game up a lot, get some waterproof. That's another thing, Mr. Florida Brian. I definitely need to get waterproof stuff for sure because my phone was not having it. It was difficult to charge. As a matter of fact, Dark Earth just joined us. She suggested I look at getting an OtterBox protective case for it, one of the waterproof cases, which I 100% agree with. I'm going to look into that very soon. Was hyped all week expecting bad weather and was disappointed for the prep I did, but we did get beneficial rain out of it. Yeah, Gary, I definitely understand. And the main thing was the tornado threat diminished. That was the whole thing. We still saw some very good activity with this. We saw tropical storm conditions. I was live in the midst of it, 40, 50, 55 mile an hour winds right off the Bay of Tampa. We saw lots of good flooding. Well, I won't say good, but we saw lots of flooding in western and northwestern Florida. We're probably still seeing some coastal flooding because of how ridiculous the onshore flow is with this system right now. So the only real severe weather threat that diminished was the tornadic potential. And that's probably why they didn't issue a watch at all last night or anything like that. I don't believe we had any severe warned storms, as a matter of fact, throughout the peninsula. We can double check the storm reports later tonight, but I don't think we had any actual warnings for severe thunderstorms, tornadoes, etc. at all. Those drivers are prize snowbirds, the tourists in their rental cars. Yeah, and I will openly admit, I see a lot of PM rental vehicles out there, and they always are the worst drivers. I'm just going to say it. I don't know who's watching right now who is renting a vehicle in Florida. This isn't specifically directed at you, but every single time I come into contact on the road, whether it be going to the gym, to work, etc., and I see a PM sticker on a license plate, they're usually the most porqueria drivers on the road, and it's a bummer because they're just doing whatever they want. No turn signal, bobbing and weaving, cutting people off, driving slow. But yeah, so we'll go into some model data. We're looking at the 12Z Euro coming in, and it looks like it's just about all the way in. So right out of the jump start, here's our system moving up the eastern seaboard. We're still going to have to watch it, although it does seem like Our severe weather action is going to dissipate very quickly with this, and they're going to have another nor'easter set up with high winds, rain, and maybe a little bit of lake effect snowfall spanning into the southern northeast and especially the Midwest United States, right up against the Appalachians. And then out over the west, it's that next breakaway low right there that's moving towards Southern California that we're going to have to watch here in the southeast. Because if you watch, as it transitions across the Rockies, there we go. We get another area of really enhanced weather phenomena that kind of spans not only the Great Plains into the Midwest Great Lakes, but we also get a really good knock of precip action down over the south and southeast, supported by our subtropical jet. Not sounding the alarm on severe weather for that just yet, just because I'm starting to learn lessons with what we have going on down here, and because of the fact we're still going to be under modified polar air at this point, we might not have a good enough amount of buoyancy and instability to provide us with some severe weather, but it is worth noting that down across the south, our models are picking up right about the 26th to the 27th, another bout of possible good enhanced weather activity right there, shortly after Christmas, and then another possibility of a system coming out of the Gulf, just like what we just saw. So those are going to be on the radar. We'll have to watch. And then here comes even another one for the new year. It looks like New Year's Day or New Year's Eve could possibly be enhanced for us along the mid-Atlantic coast and the southeast, depending on if this unfolds. And then New Year's Day is going to be spectacular with some pretty good weather across the eastern seaboard, minus this low spinning over the northeast. Granted, this is 384 hours out, so probably going to see changes. So we'll see. Those are on our radar right now, but for a little bit, in terms of severe weather, we get a slight break. We still have to get through the rest of what this cyclone has to offer as it transitions to the mid-Atlantic states, but outside of that, it looks like we're going to take a break for a little while, at least until maybe Christmas time. Christmas time is when we could have some stuff flaring up for the southeast, the deep south, and then the rest of the United States as it transitions eastward. This is what we have on Storm Prediction Center right now. Like I'd mentioned, North and South Carolina, we're seeing that slight threat with that onshore flow and that warm conveyor being enhanced by the Gulf Stream waters. But outside of that, that's about it. Day 2, it kind of goes away altogether almost, with a little bit of a marginal risk for Manhattan, some of the areas surrounding that, Connecticut, Massachusetts. And then by the next day, nada. We're going to take a nice little break. And then before we wrap up, I thought this was pretty neat. This was our first chase. So we started up in the Haines City, Davenport area. We went south through Winter Haven, Bartow, Bowling Green, Zolfo Springs, Arcadia, and then down towards Port Charlotte. Went through Punta Gorda, and then curved back to the west and then north after we stopped in Venice. And went all the way up through here. This was the general area we saw a lot of really bad accidents. Let me change the color so you guys can see it. Right in through here was where there was I passed 5 different accidents. And then there were a few others that happened in the Tampa Bay area because I heard the emergency sirens and whatnot. DPK fish aquariums, even with the winds, cause a lot of power outages, and even in the areas that never lost power. Yep. We did have some really good winds. Like, again, we just didn't have the tornado threat, but we definitely did see our tropical storm-like impacts. Very strong winds, very heavy rain, very aggressive seas along the coastline. So it was a bona fide storm system that we went through. We just luckily dodged the very aggressive tornadic threat because of how stable we were in the low to mid levels. And like I said, that's why another key takeaway from the weather perspective of it is, for severe weather activity, we should really look at Skew-Ts. Skew-Ts are going to tell us a lot right as the event is getting ready to unfold. But yeah, guys, that's pretty much it. We're probably going to get ready to wrap up the stream. I have things to do today, and I'll keep you guys posted. Unless you guys have any questions. Very small group of us in the chat right now, probably because the weather event for Florida is over with. And we'll be back again very soon, and we'll see what the rest of the winter has in store for us, the rest of the month for that matter. And then here very soon, we'll do another little update on what next hurricane season could possibly look like, and go from there. I'm not too sure what happened with Pat. He messaged me earlier today asking how the rest of the storm chase was, but he never mentioned what happened with the stream and why it suddenly just kicked us out yesterday. And I'm noticing YouTube has been doing that recently, because I believe it was the other day we were on a live stream here in the Weather Center, and all of a sudden YouTube just quit and the live stream cut, which was very disappointing. So we got to figure out what's going on with that. Isaac Logan, real quick before we wrap up, I'll show you a Skew-T sounding real quick, just so we can take a look at it. Let's go to observations and analysis. We'll look at an actual observed Skew-T. So here is an upper air sounding. We'll go to Melbourne. Here is a Skew-T right here. And Skew-T does an excellent job of identifying what our weather environment looks like. In terms of our stability, how moist or how dry we are. We have a lot of really good indices on the left hand or on the right hand side here that'll show us exactly what kind of parameters we have in place for severe weather. Like for example, right here we have a top of 91. Let me see here. We got a freezing level of 591. Wow, that's a really low freezing level, really? Actually, yeah, very low freezing level. No, not a very low freezing level. Here's the so let me give you a crash course real quick. So these are going to be different adiabats right in through here. It might be very difficult to see, but we have different adiabatic lines right here which show lapse rates in the environment. Like so. We have these, and then if you look closer, it might be very difficult to see, but we have two different lines. These are going to be the dry adiabats right here. And then these ones that take a much less aggressive route are going to be your moist adiabats. And right from the jump start, like I said, these are very telling. Just looking at the lapse rate on this, it's very moist. We're following the moist adiabat. So truthfully, this is a very stable environment. We're not really going to get much out of it. We do have a lot of good dry air in the mid to upper levels, and we're still fairly saturated according to the Melbourne sounding earlier this morning. This is 0Z overnight. So, I mean, yeah, we do have some instability. It shows that we have, let's see, where did I see it? We have 539 joules per kilogram of CAPE, but we do have a little bit of what's called CINH, C-I-N-H, convective inhibition. So that goes to show that there is a weak cap preventing these storms from really blowing up, and that's because we're inverted. If you look right in through here, there's a small area called an inversion where we are actually warmer aloft than we are down at the surface. And you don't want that for severe weather. You want a very warm, low-level environment, a very shallow lapse rate to a steep lapse rate, because that's going to help with a lot of the thunderstorm activity. When you have inverted temperatures, you're obviously not going to have the mixing, because obviously, as we know, warm air rises, cold air sinks. So if we're colder at the surface than we are in the upper levels, we don't have any of that mixing going on. We are capped. So the cold air is just going to stay down at the surface, and then in the upper levels, the warm air is just going to kind of linger and chill up there, and so we don't really have anything going on. If we had a sounding that looked something along the lines of this, like so, then we would have a much greater chance at seeing some good severe weather, because all of this area in here would now be CAPE. This would be highlighted as very, very good amounts of convective available potential energy. We would have no convective inhibition. We would have a totally uncapped environment, and we could follow the dry adiabatic lapse rate to show where our cloud tops are likely to be when they condense and form their thunderstorms. And it'll also be a really good indication of whether or not we get hail. See, for example, right now, this is different from what I'm used to reading. I do believe this is going to be the millibar level as opposed to the height. I'm used to reading it in feet or meters. This is 654 millibars is where our wet bulb zero height is. So somewhere around right in through here is where our wet bulb zero height is, and that's not favorable for hail or any really good downdrafts or anything like that. I mean, this was last night at 0Z, so we still had a really good lifted index to see some thunderstorm activity, more or less, negative 1.8 with an SI of negative 1.3. So we still had the possibility of some showers, some storms, but nothing jumping out right here that shows that we could have severe weather, at least according to our overnight sounding out of Melbourne. So this is what we need to start using a little bit more of on this channel for when we brief severe weather activity and what the environment looks like in terms of how we categorize it. And I'll openly admit I need to refresh my memory with my weather material that I still have on hand on how to really dissect Skew-Ts, because I've lost a lot of knowledge since I haven't really been using them. I can still read it and kind of get a general idea of what kind of environment we're looking at just by taking a quick glance, but I definitely want to start dissecting these and pulling them apart, if you will, for future videos and future severe weather potentials. But alrighty, folks, we're going to go ahead and end the live stream. It's 33, going on 34 minutes in. In fact, it looks like the time has paused. I don't like that. So we'll go ahead and call it here. Thank you guys very much for joining today. Thank you very much for your support and all your words of encouragement and tuning in last night as we went through our first chase. Definitely more to come. Lots of really key lessons to take away and refurbish for the next storm chase we go on. Lots of good information. And that's why I wouldn't necessarily say that it was a bust. In my opinion, did we not get any tornadoes? No. Did we see some pretty cool action? I think so. Was it a great learning experience? 7,000%. And that's why I'll never call it a bust if there's things that we can take away and improve for next time. Always on a learning curve here, and that's why I would say yesterday was a huge success, because it showed me some things that I need to take note of for the future. So this way, next storm chase and then the one after that, and then potentially leading into hurricane season when this coverage is really going to matter a lot. Oh yeah, we're going to be set up for success big time. So I like the fact that we actually had a bit of a weather bust, because it gave us the opportunity to simply just take it for a test drive, no pun intended, and iron out the kinks. And I know for certain that this is not going to be our last southeast storm system to possibly bring severe weather. Definitely not while El Niño's in place. And then we're really going to need to buckle down and ensure that our quality of content and the quantity of content are there when it does matter most for next hurricane season and next tornado season. So I'm really excited we got to go along for the ride last night. It was great when the stream was working. It was great getting out there and looking at the sea, looking at the bay, looking at the skyline in the background, getting out there in the tropical storm level winds. Very cool first chase, you know. I didn't expect the first chase to be something like Hurricane Idalia or Hurricane Ian, you know, nothing like that. So it was definitely an excellent opportunity to just very carefully take things out for a test run, a dry run, and that was kind of our first little method through it, and now we can go back to the beginning and revamp and prepare for next time. So great key takeaways. I know exactly what it is I need to do to revamp the process and revamp the content for you guys. So it's only going to get better, and I'm very excited and very thankful for that. And I can't thank you guys enough for the support that you provided, because it goes to show you people are a wonderful audience, and it just only further invigorates me to get that much better at what I do for you guys. And as funny as this is going to sound, it makes me feel a lot better putting myself in harm's way for each and every one of you watching. So definitely lots to learn from, lots of key takeaways, and it's only going to go up from here. Like Brian, you always say, we're growing, and we're just going to continue to grow, and I'm very excited. So, and honestly, truthfully, given that this is the first chase, I'm kind of glad the weather was a bust, because I wouldn't want to miss anything, and I wouldn't want to, skip over possible good content to give to you guys because of lag or connectivity issues. I know better now to stay off freeways and interstates when the weather's really bad, because that's definitely not good. I definitely don't want to possibly get into accidents in the middle of a live stream either. Hurricane I Diddly Doodah. I'm glad you still remember that. That was from an old video when this channel was still, I would think before 1,000 subscribers, I did that little I Diddly Doodah thing in one of my videos. So proud of you, Nazario, taking the chance and chasing the best way to improvise. 175% DPK, yep. Very proud of you, Farm Girl. Thank you, guys. We are growing, brother, 100%. And it's right now we may as well take advantage of ironing out the kinks and the growing pains, because when it matters, we can't be lagging, the phone's overheating, my window's foggy. Like, no, when we are in the possible midst of tornado activity or a hurricane, I definitely want to be there for you guys and give you that insight right on the front lines. So cheers to everybody out there who dropped some donations. I love you guys for that. Cheers to everybody out there who was tuning in, sharing the video, commenting and whatnot. Overall, it was a success. I would take it as a success. I took you guys along for the ride. We went on a full-fledged, full route, I think 400-mile round-trip storm chase, which was great. So lots of good key takeaways, and we're just going to continue to improve on them. But I'll talk to you guys very soon. We're going to go ahead and cut the stream. If you have any questions or comments or suggestions even, please drop them in the comments section below, or drop me a line on my TikTok or my Instagram. Always open to suggestions. I know, Dark Earth, you also sent me a link for a better microphone. I definitely want to invest in something like that as well. I got to putz around with my lapel mics too, because the few times I busted them out during Idalia, they were doing okay, and I think maybe we were not connecting to them properly last night, and that's why you got a lot of that wind noise. So again, little small improvement things I want to jot down in my notes and then just revamp them for next time. I agree. I definitely agree. 110%. Back roads and someone to ride shotgun and to watch my back, eyes in the back of my head. But all right, folks, we will talk to you very soon. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your Sunday and a great rest of your week. We'll see you soon. This is wxcenter Nazario, signing out.